Doing good.
Okay. Go ahead. There's your magnifiers. Here's your cell punch.
There it is.
That's what the frame looks like when you're done. Don't try that on plastic foundation. Doesn't work.
Do you warm your punch up at all? You just use it room temperature?
I usually warm it up with hot water.
Okay.
Yep. This is what it looks like once you've put them on the bar with a little bit of wax. Okay, now your graft is ready. You've got either your wax cups stuck on there that you punched out, or you've got a frame that you've notched the cells a la Mel Disselcone, or you've got a frame of plastic cups that you just grafted into for the first time, and it's going right in here, and you see how they're festooning all through this. That's exactly what you want. Sometimes it's so strong that that's just completely full of bees. So what you're going to do is take the frame and just rest it in there and allow it to float down in. Don't push. It'll just slowly float down in as the bees move out of the way. And you want it just completely covered with bees. If we have any doubt about the quantity of pollen, we'll give them pollen patties. This is sort of a belt and suspenders approach. If you want really good queens, you just go all out and you give them all the food they could possibly need. Fill up the feeder. And these are queen cells that have just been started. So you can see the massive amount of royal jelly that's in there. That means you've got plenty of nurse bees. They're really feeding those larvae, and they've accepted them because they're starting to extend the cups. This is what it should look like. This is about 2-3 days. You can see they've drawn the cells out most of the way. They're still unsealed. Go ahead. And so we're right about here or here at this point. And in another day or two, the cells will be sealed. Now you've got a choice. Remember how we talked about using the emergency impulse? We've created this colony that is queenless. And so they're raising these cells under the emergency desire to build cells. You can at any point after they've accepted the cells and started adding wax to them and feeding the larvae, you can combine it with the queen right portion of the colony. So you can take that hive that was facing backwards, turn it around, pick the box up with the queen cells in it and put it above a queen excluder, above the queen right box. And it's so strong that they'll continue raising those cells that you grafted because they think they're going to swarm. All right? I don't always do that. I sometimes wait till day 5 and combine it after they've been sealed, because there will be young larvae in the queen right box. So you have the advantage of them desiring to raise swarm cells, which might give you an advantage in having nicer queen cells, but you've got the disadvantage that some of the nurse bees that are in your cell building box will go down to feed the larvae that are in that queen right box. And so I'll often wait until either it's really close or the cells have been completely sealed and then recombine them. This is day 5 after the graft. What we've done is we've put the queen right box back on the bottom. We've got the, this is only if you're going to repeat it more than once. If you're just doing one, you don't need to worry about this. But we've moved the queen. Remember how we took the queen out and we put her in a different box? That means we've got a box that had the queen in it, which now has sealed brood. That becomes our graft box for the next round. That becomes the box with only sealed brood in it. So that third box is the graft box for next time. And then the top box is the graft box for this time that has our queen cells in it. But it won't have any sealed brood in it by the time those cells are ready. Okay, we talked about this, so you can cruise through that.
Andrew,
Yes?
when you're grafting, do you need to let the bar sit there a little while? And you're defying gravity when you put that frame in?
The surface tension of the royal jelly holds the larva in place.
So we can do it.
So you can, as soon as you've got the larva in there, you can turn it over and put it in. But you don't want to jar it or shake it.
Yeah.
At no point do you want to jar or shake the queen cells. On the day that the queen cells are ripe, for instance, you don't shake the nurse bees off because you would kill or injure all your queens. You'd have all these maimed queens running around. And I have seen maimed queens in the mating yard when somebody has dropped a batch of queen cells, you know, as they were heading out to the mating nukes to put the queen cells in, somebody will fumble it or something. And you can tell when they used them anyway because you'll have these injured queens that were damaged while they were developing. Okay, here they are on day 11. You can't see it because there's so many nurse bees, but there are, oh, it looks like maybe about 37 queen cells on there. Go ahead. That's what you want it to look like. That's how strong your cell builder should look. And that's, so you take your brush, and you don't brush like you're painting a house. You drag it at an angle. If this is the frame with the queen cells, you drag it like this so that you're not hitting the queen cells. You're just kind of gently loosening the nurse bees until they're all off and back in the colony. And then you can take your queen cells somewhere a little ways away and put them in your colonies that you want to make up. This year, so we run 10 cell builders, and this year we had a graft where we had 3 where 100% got accepted. Wow. And that's never happened before. We often get 1 where every single cell is accepted. This year we had one where there was 3, which is a way of saying don't expect them to accept every cell. They won't. You'll have injured the larva, they won't like it. You know, it was late on a Friday, you know, who knows what's going on, but they won't accept them all. So if we want 200 queen cells to use in the mating nukes, we'll graft 300. And then we'll usually have 200 and then some to sell or give away. But we like to have about that margin of error. So just figure on 50% success, moving up to 65 to 70% success as you get a little better at it. Okay? What you want to see is nice deep stippling. That means they've been well tended after they've been sealed. So you recombine it and then they raise them like swarm cells. The stippling is an indication that they've been well cared for after sealing. Apparently that is relevant. There are people who stick them in an incubator, but the bees are communicating with those queens. You'll see the bees on those cells and they're shaking them, they're vibrating. And they're building this stippling and taking care of them and keeping them just the right temperature. So it's not quite the same as sticking them in an incubator. This is the very first batch of queen cells I ever raised. And we put them in a little padded shoe box. It was a kid's shoe box, you know, about this big from when my kids were really tiny. And we put all the queen cells in there to keep them warm, and it's padded with cotton batting in the bottom. It's now the box that we use to transfer 16 cells, which does 2 pallets of mating nukes at a time. And we have a 12-volt incubator that rides in the truck that plugs into the cigarette lighter that keeps the cells warm when we drive from the honey house to the various mating yards where the cells are going. But if you're just going somewhere else in your own yard, you can pull the cells off. If you have to go a distance and you only have a few cells, I know Jeff's carried them inside his shirt and they've done well. We've sent them with other people and put them in a little foam block, and if you keep them at body temperature, they'll live and they'll perform pretty well. But if you have larger numbers, you need an incubator. If it's going to be any length of time, you can use a hot water bottle, you know, figure something out. So these are some regular nukes. We put maybe a third of the cells into regular nukes. Go ahead. They go in basically like this. There's a flange on the plastic cup. As long as it's a strong nuke, you can just hang it between the frames. That queen cell will hang down, the bees will keep it warm. We've actually more recently discovered we get better success if we pull a frame out and embed the cell in the frame near some brood. So even though you're supposed to be able to do this, that's how the cups are designed, is to kind of hang there. We get better success rate if we actually take the time to pull a frame out, embed it in the frame where you see a large cluster of bees, and then put it back in. These are mating nukes. We actually don't use the styrofoam anymore. We've got some bigger homemade wooden ones, but it's the same idea. It's a little mini colony. It's not ever going to grow into a colony. We're not going to sell these to somebody next spring. These are just for mating queens. And we'll cruise through this pretty fast. But these are set up with little tiny frames with, you know, about a quart of bees. These small, wait, back up. You can see the cup embedded in the frame. You can picture that on a bigger frame. Go ahead. Those small frames are really easy to catch queens on. So once you've put it in, so on day 11, they come out of the cell builder, and on the same day they go into the mating nukes, or into your regular nuke if you're not doing a mating nuke. And then a couple days later, the cells hatch. They might hatch the next day if you grafted a slightly too old larva, right? If your larva was too old when you grafted it by 24 or 48 hours, your queens may be emerging the same day you pull them out of the cell builder. So don't be late. That's why the first item on the list was the calendar. If you booger this up and one queen emerges first, she'll kill all the other ones. And then you've got one virgin queen running around in your cell builder, and that's all you've got. And you have to find her. And virgins are really hard to find because they look a lot like a worker. It is possible to do it, but I don't recommend going that route. So get them out in a timely manner, get the cells in the mating nukes. So it says cells hatch. I don't like that terminology because they aren't hatching, they're emerging. They already hatched back here when they were an egg. So the cells emerge, and then it takes a couple days for her to harden off, prep. She might make an exploring flight and kind of orient herself. And then she starts getting serious about making a mating flight. And then she comes back and she settles. And after maybe 3 or 4 days, post-mating, she'll start laying. And so we usually check them at 2 weeks and just look for eggs. So 2 weeks from the day that the cell went in would be the earliest that you would expect to see eggs. In your operation, I would suggest checking at 3 weeks because it's going to be much more obvious whether you were successful or not. Okay? So don't check too early, and if you do want to check at 2 weeks, all you're looking for is eggs. Just pull a couple frames until you see eggs or until you're sure there aren't any. But if you don't see any, you still have to wait another week to see if maybe she was just delayed. So that's why you should really wait till 3 weeks. But you can cause the bees to ball your queen because they aren't related to her yet, right? They're not her daughters yet. So you want to be really gentle handling that nuke until she's turned the population over. Then you can handle it like a regular colony. So you're just checking to make sure that she's successfully mated and is laying. And if at 3 weeks she hasn't, it's probably too late for her to do so, and you can recombine it with a full-size colony or with a nuke that was successful. Okay, here's the mating part. Let's cruise through this. This is just a visual indication of the tremendous variability of genetics that can happen when you have one queen mating with multiple drones. It's fascinating, but that's a whole topic for another night. So let's say 3 weeks, 2 weeks to 3 weeks later, you come back. And if you're like us and you're actually going to remove the queens and sell them, this is what it looks like. You look for the queen. You've got these lovely tiny combs that are easy to handle, very quick to spot a queen on. You pick the queen up, you mark her. If you want to try these little tubes, I know Jack sells them. We just pick them up by the wings, touch them to your index finger. They'll grab it with all 3 pairs of legs, and you just gently rest your thumb against the legs that are on one side. And that holds her steady, and you touch the paint stick to her thorax. If you're going to practice on drums. It's really funny when I had a helper who was practicing, we had all these, I think it was yellow that year, we had all these yellow dotted drones running around. It's a little distracting. Then the queen goes in a cage. We usually put in 5 nurse bees to be attendants for the queen. We catch them while their heads are down in the cell getting a drink of nectar, so they aren't looking at you. We pick them up from the head end and they go in pointy end first. There's one going in pointy end first. We used to ship them, we don't anymore. Betterby does that for us. So you can cruise through all this. Let's go back one. This is not how you introduce a queen. This is somebody else's picture. The candy plug goes up. So let's just remember that. The screen needs to be to either this side or that side, and the candy plug should be up. So if one of the attendants dies, she doesn't block the hole. Okay. And then your new queen comes out and everybody loves her. You're good to go. All right, we cruised through that last part. So any questions about the queen rearing? And then if anybody's still awake, I'm happy to take any other questions about anything at all. Did that make you happy, Jeff, to go
That
through?
made me very happy.
All right.
I hope everyone else can.
Well, it's a lot to think about.
So one of the advantages of this is at least you know when you buy a queen, what the queen breeder did to raise that queen. This is a similar process no matter who is raising the queen. The specifics will be slightly different, but the basic concept from cell builder setup to grafting to queen cells ready into mating nukes, queens getting caught and caged and then shipped to you. That's the whole process. That's why your queen costs $30 or $35 or $40, whatever your queen costs. It's a lot of work. Once the queen cells go in the mating nukes, it completely depends on the weather and the dragonflies and a bunch of things beyond my knowledge or control to determine how many queens successfully mate and come back and start laying. So we've had anything from 60% success to this year we were up above 90% on one catch. But that's pretty rare. And so there's a huge amount of, I won't say loss, but there's a certain number that don't make it. They get eaten by dragonflies coming back from their mating flight, and you never see them again. So,
But those colonies turn into laying workers is what I've found.
yeah,
We
Yep.
seem to be a little patient about things and don't rush them at that point.
Yep.
I have a lot of basic questions. In the perfect world, when do you like to start grafting or doing the splits or raising your queens? In a perfect world.
In a perfect world, when do we start grafting and making splits? So you can start raising queens when you have drones in the purple-eye stage. By the time you've set up your cell builder and you've grafted and the queens have developed and then have emerged from the cell and are ready to mate, those drones that were in the purple-eye stage will be sexually mature and flying. To make splits, I usually wait until they're starting to think about swarming, because that's all a split is an artificial swarm. And in my area, the bees get serious about swarming on the dandelions, and so we don't make splits before dandelions. Some people do, but you're risking, in my experience, the weather can turn sour pretty quickly. This year was a good example. It stayed cold and extremely wet. If we'd had any early splits, they would have fizzled. We waited until the dandelions, and we had walkaway splits that we made in May that produced 3 supers of honey. Hard to argue with that. So yeah, wait until the bees are naturally thinking about reproducing and try and stay about a week ahead of them. Anything else? Anything related to harvest? Winter packing?
I have a thing that's related to Varroa. Kirsten Trainer gave a talk at Betterby, and she talked about taking drone brood out
Yep,
as a varroa management.
yep.
And so I've been doing that for 2 years.
And are you freezing or are you cutting?
Cutting.
Yeah, so you're putting a small frame in a big box?
No, I have foundationless frames.
Okay, so you're just cutting down.
I'm just cutting around it.
Yep.
For the most part. And I've had really low varroa counts.
Yes.
I also live within a mile of another better bee queen breeder.
Yep.
And he said to me, raise me lots of drones. I smiled. But, that's his job to raise the drones.
That's absolutely.
But I know that you're treatment free.
Yep.
So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on cutting out drone brood, or if you have some other good advice.
So if you're choosing to, or if you're trying to be minimalist in your chemical treatments,
Right.
then cutting drone brood is an excellent idea. Before we got so seriously into queen rearing, we did a lot of it ourselves.
Yeah.
We do not now, because we need the drones, just like you were talking about the other guy. But we do keep in touch with a lot of people that we sell bees to. And one gal who keeps bees actually in Burlington City cut drone brood religiously all year in a nuke that we sold her.
Yeah.
And when she tested for mites in the late summer to see if she needed to treat, her mite count
Yeah.
was a 0.
Mine is 0, 1, and 2.
Yep, and you do not need to treat if your mite counts are that low. So that's integrated pest management,
Right.
where you're doing more than just waiting for a problem and then throwing chemicals at it. And I think it's an excellent idea.
You must mess with their minds.
It is, so it's disruptive to the colony. It causes them to expend resources on raising more drones and replacing the wax. On the other hand, it's not nearly as disruptive as having the colony succumb to parasitic mite syndrome.
Right. And deal with all that.
They deal with all that.
Disease.
Yep. So it's a great idea. Some people find, like you, that it's the only thing they need to do. Some people combine it, with a fall treatment or what have you. But if you do that and then you just test, then you know if you need to do a fall treatment. And if the numbers are really low and you're not seeing mites drifting in from collapsing colonies nearby, then you may not need to treat at all.
I treated 2 colonies when the numbers got to be 4 per 300, but that's still below.
That's still technically below the treatment threshold, yeah, but being safe is not a bad thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you're not doing that, we're seeing people with non-resistant bees that aren't cutting drone brood needing to treat 3 times a year in order to keep the mites in check.
On that same line with the freezing part of it, with the green frames.
Yeah.
When do you do it? When's the best time to do that?
So put it in as soon as they start raising brood in the spring. The reason is, if you can get mites in that first round of drone brood that is raised in the spring, you can kill almost every mite in the colony. And in fact, we experimented with only doing it once. And if you get it early and you do it that first time, you've wiped out all the foundress mites that wintered over and that are so desperate for a meal that when they hit that drone brood, they all go in there and then you kill them all. And you could actually stop right then, and you would have set back the mites so far that you would not then need to treat again until the fall. Now if you do what Jean did and keep doing it all summer, you may end up with no mites in the fall either. But if you're not going to be around, if you're going to go on vacation in July for 2 weeks, then don't do that. Don't leave that drone frame in there, because then you're just breeding mites. But if you're going to be around all summer and you're good with the schedule and you're able to remove it as soon as it's capped and before any of the drones emerge, then by all means keep doing it all summer. But the real key is getting it in there early. And in a 10-frame box, the best spot for that green frame is 3 spaces in from the edge. And as soon as the brood nest expands to hit that spot, the queen will lay in it and boom, they're ready to go. And of course, there'll still be a few mites because there will be some in the worker brood. But if you can catch that first round of mites, you can really knock them back. Okay.
No more questions?
I've heard some conflicting stories about the treatment that you do lay in on top of frames. Some people leave it there.
Which one?
Pro, might have wait quick.
Are you thinking of strips, or are you thinking of
Strips.
pads?
Well, they're pads, it's, I think it's the,
Might have wait.
yes,
Oh, by the way, quick strips, which is our
Former Pro, sorry, thank you.
Yep,
So, you know, you can either treat with the 2 strips or the 1.
Yep.
There's different days that it says on the package.
yep.
I've heard some different theories about some people leave them on forever and the bees just continue to eat it. But when I read the directions on the package, it says to remove them after so many days.
Yeah, the directions are there for a reason.
Okay.
They spent about money in that research.
Yeah,
Okay.
and if you want some good on-the-ground research, check out scientificbeekeeping.com. There's
Okay.
a guy named Randy Oliver. He writes a column or 2 every month for the Bee Journal. And he's done extensive testing on formic acid on his own bees. And he's published the results. So if
Okay.
you're interested in formic, the problem with formic and the problem with leaving it in there is it kills brood and it kills queens. Okay, so it's kind of like chemotherapy. So it's not that these chemicals don't kill mites, but you're trying to kill a little bug on a big bug. And so that's why they've got the instructions. The instructions are there so that you kill your little bug without injuring your big bug. And there are guys who want to requeen who will use an extra heavy dose of formic, and it kills all the queens. And then they come back and there's no mites and no queens, and they requeen everything and they're back in business. But you don't want to do that unless you've intended to.
Right.
So Randy's got a bunch of advice about how to set them in there, and he's done some stuff with increasing ventilation, which is counterintuitive when you're trying to gas the mites. But what it does is it reduces your mite fall slightly while increasing your brood survival tremendously. And so you end up not killing as many of your bees and not injuring your queens, and you kill almost as many mites. So anyway, check it out. It's a big website, but he's got pretty good navigation to find the information about various miticides. And it's well worth taking an afternoon to look through there.
And it was,
scientificbeekeeping.com.
And this journal that they're passing out today has got one of his articles in it.
Yep.
And he has just abruptly stopped his shot towel, glycerin and oxalic acid.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He was not getting, apparently he wasn't getting the results.
That he
He
wanted.
just ended it. Yes.
So he's a commercial operator in California who's got a pretty big operation and does research on the ground with his own hives and then publishes it in the Bee Journal.
Very open.
And so it's really, I feel like a lot of it is much more pragmatic than some of the research that's going on at the universities,
Yeah.
which is more theoretical in nature. He's trying stuff in his own hives on the ground, and he's getting real results.
good. I'm glad I took my strips back off. It
Yep.
didn't really look like they were eating a lot either, so I'm thinking, oh, you know, should I let them on like I was told to, or,
You left it in for the full treatment?
for the full amount of days?
Yeah, okay.
I did 1 hive with 1 strip and 1 hive with 2.
Yeah, they
For
did.
my mite count.
That's what we use to make, tend to propolis everything in, not